Kia ora, everybody. Sorry for scaring anybody. We're Emily and Paige, and we're here to talk to you about what community management looks like in 2022.
Okay, so before we start, we just want to take you through what we'll be discussing in our talk. So in short, the aim of our talk is to help you start the process and understanding of community management as a small studio or a solo dev, and an overview of the best practices in 2022 and just why you might need a community manager. This includes who we are, what community management is, as well as a look at some of the hot and spicy socials that you should be checking out at the moment, and just some other notes in between because we wanted to. So in terms of actually who we are as people, my name is Paige. I am the community manager at AgroCrab, a game studio based in Seattle. I focus on unhinged marketing tactics and primarily use TikTok, Twitter, and Discord.
And I'm Emily. I'm the community manager for Balancing Monkey Games. Thank you very much, Paige, for my beautiful icon.
Thank you. I worked very hard.
Yeah, you really did. So my focus is Discord right now, and the strategy for releasing our next game, which we can't talk about yet. I'm also working on the narrative for our next game.
Yeah, so we actually met very briefly thanks to our overlap at working at Wanderer, as well as this very cool person named Nat, who is very lovely, and basically we worked with them at Wanderer and made us talk to each other more and more, and then now here we are networking and doing a talk together. Yeah. So yeah, like we said, we're both full-time community managers for our very cool studios. Please check out our games or else. So on to you, Emily.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's me. The decade preceding Balancing Monkey Games, otherwise known as my 20s, were a very interesting time. I did a very long stint in retail. Shout out to all my retail homies. We share some suffering. I primarily worked at an Australian telecommunications company called Telstra for the better part of 4 years, which gave me a lot of soft skills, and they have served me really, really well. I studied game development. I half finished a Bachelor of Communications. I tried becoming a Twitch streamer, which is an unbelievably difficult job. And I think the biggest thing that Ren actually touched on in her keynote was I went to Stugan in 2018. I went there with my friend Candice and we worked on a game called Grimoire. As a side note, please follow Candice on Instagram. She's an amazing artist. So really quickly, for those of you who don't know, Stugan, or Stugan in my bad Aussie accent, is a not-for-profit indie game developer accelerator program where you go into the Swedish woods for 7 weeks and you work on the prototype for your dream game, and they look after you, they do everything for you. It changed my life, it changed the trajectory of my career. Unfortunately, Grimoire didn't work out, it never progressed past being a demo, but the experience was incredible. After Stugan, I did a brief stint with the lovely folks at Lumi Interactive in Melbourne. I worked on a mobile game called Critic Clash. And then after I wrapped up with them, I decided to move to lovely Aotearoa to be closer to my Kiwi partner who I actually met at Stugan. So I decided to combine my decade's worth of weird and wonderful experiences and try for a role as a community manager. And it worked out. My first job here in New Zealand was community and marketing manager for Wanderer. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out for me there. I was only there for about 2-3 months. But that's okay, because when I left, I got a cool message from a guy called Sam. Local legend Sam Barham. I'm so sorry, Sam, please don't fire me. And I joined Balancing Monkey in March 2020. I've been there ever since. It's a wonderful place to work. I've helped ship our game before we leave, a cozy city building game where you live peacefully until you get harassed by space whales. I've shipped it 5 times. That's actually 10, but you get what I mean. The biggest launches for it were on the Epic Game Store in May 2020, and then a year later on Steam in May 2021. Our vibe and tone is gentle, friendly, kind, sincere, but stern when needed. We try our very, very best to be kind, though. For Before We Leave in Balancing Monkey Games, I fully embody the phrase variety is the spice of life. I've worked on our website, blog posts, email, newsletters, our Twitter, both our Facebook pages, our YouTube, our Twitch channel, our Discord, and subreddit. I've helped manage our Steam page and its community forums and those lovely reviews that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I've also helped make our trailers, lots of graphical content. I've helped with hiring in the studio, mentoring new employees, and also working on Before We Leave, and as I mentioned before, our new game itself. I've helped write our employee handbook and our brand book. I believe that community management starts within your studio as well as being, outside of it. You can't have a nice community externally if you don't have a nice one within your studio. Thank you. So after doing all of that stuff, I can confidently say that my strengths as a community manager is long-term high-level strategy that focuses on managing our brands, the creation of written posts, as well as managing our big old Discord community. Nowadays, our social media manager and producer, Sarah, handles all of our social media platforms, and she's just launched our brand spanking new TikTok, so please go follow us. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for doing such a wonderful job. You're crushing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, hello. So my journey starts where, again, my name is Paige. My journey starts where I was in my final year of uni, and I landed an internship working at Wanderer. That's where I met Emily. I started there actually as a 3D animator and motion capture artist. I also did some motion capture acting for the game and with indies doing a little bit of everything. So people who don't know, Wanderer is a VR time travel adventure game with a bit of puzzles, and it's out on PSVR and Steam, and you just go do that. So at the same time of my internship, I was also building my own platform on TikTok at the time as kind of like a creative output on the side. And I was mainly using it making chaotic 3D videos like Hank Hill's a hot dog, or Kermit the Frog dancing to a raunchy song. So as you can see, I really made sure to put my degree to use here, just really, really well. After about 7 months at Wanderer, I think, we were running low on animation work, and that's actually when they approached me about trying out community management. They had heard about my TikTok and thought that maybe I'd do well trying out the role. So with them, I ended up doing roughly half animation work and half community work for the studio. At the time when they approached me about it, my thoughts were bruh, I have no idea how to do any of this. I don't know what this is, but I'll pretend I do, So I ended up researching the role, had a lot of trial and error, annoyed Emily for help on strategy whenever needed. It was basically a massive FAFO, which in PG terms is fluff around, find out. It was a lot of fun getting trial and error for different strategies, since it was one of the first big games with these two studios. And it was certainly a key point in my journey. And then came my journey at Aggro Crab. So for people who don't know, they're an indie studio based in Seattle. Their first big title was a game called Going Under. It's a satirical roguelike dungeon crawler that criticizes toxic tech startup culture. I was looking for full-time work, so Nick, who was one of the studio heads at the studio, happened to come across my tweet about needing work and found my personal TikTok account linked, and also my previous experience as well. He messaged me to have a call, and I specifically remember him pull out his phone in the call and say, "You made a video with the audio going, 'Smack my ass like a drum' to Kermit the Frog." And then he was like, "We need someone like this." And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is not what I was expecting. I was so nervous, but it was great. So I ended up starting with them in October last year, and we decided to publish a game in 1 month. Yep. This was a creepy indie game called Subway Midnight, and we used it to kickstart our studio's TikTok account and just onboard me onto the position. And it was a lot of fun to do. Overall, our brand focuses on being unprofessional and just not taking any smack, basically. It's a lot of fun because we get to challenge the typical customer service tone most studios feel that they have to follow. We're making games, it's supposed to be fun, so we were like, why not make it more fun and do that too? So we're currently working on Another Crab's Treasure, a Souls-like platformer about a hermit crab named Krill. His prized possession has been repossessed, and you have to hunt it down to get it back. So if you hate capitalism, you'll probably like it. It's pretty good. I also do a little bit of work for another company called Rose City Games on the side as well, and that's where I am today.
All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes. So, you're a humble indie developer, and you would like to make some money from the game that you've been working your butt off on. There we go. Your launch date is creeping closer, and you're remembering all the warnings from the developer community about rallying people around your game or risking having poor sales. Thus enters community management, but what on earth is it? At its most basic level, community management is about gathering people who are passionate about what you're doing and keeping them interested in dedicated, curated spaces. You want to build a community that will stick around and advocate for your game and perhaps even your studio too. Community management is kind of a recent phenomenon. Companies and brands in and outside of game development have discovered that building a fun, relatable, authentic, easy to talk to presence is a great way to build momentum for sales and your brand reputation as well. But with that, all that said, where do you actually start?
So yeah, just like if you're about to set up and start your project in Unity or Unreal or whatever you want to do it on, setting up your game's online presence is very fun and very exciting to do. Everything feels like it's starting to finally come to life. It's good to have these accounts just created and ready to go, but before you set all these platforms listed here, we just want to give you a brief overview of the most common sites that people are using at the moment. These are from what we've found on our own audiences, to be fair. So this can vary depending on your target audience and who you are catering to. So just acknowledge that there in this area. So Twitter it's a time. You might love it, you might hate it, depending on you. Aside from the fact that it's a lot of fun to shitpost on Twitter, you can show off your work there to just get attention from fellow devs, as well as fans, press, media, and content creators. There's just a large demographic on that site. It can be hard to grow a platform here at the start. You really need to stand out on the site, since it's just so easy for a tweet to just be forgotten about. So depending on that also contributes how this can translate to sales, wish lists, and a community. But once you've got it going, it can be really great. TikTok is currently the place where all the hip Gen Z are hanging out, and other generations are kind of scared of it at the start. But then once you're into it and you start using it, your soul is kind of bound to it, and it's very hard to stop using it. And it's extremely fast growing and one of the top competitors of social media at the moment. I very much like it. Facebook, in my opinion, is not the best at the moment. It is outdated in a lot of strategy for how social media is working nowadays. And overall, personally, I think it's a little bit garbo, but since Facebook now owns Oculus, which got renamed to Meta, there's a large community hub for VR games, and it's also a great platform for mobile games for advertising purposes and target audience. So it really does depend on your demographic, I guess. Yeah, so honestly though, unless you pay for the engagement on Facebook, you might actually have quite a rough time on there.
On the topic of Facebook, what I would recommend you do with it really quickly is make a game page for your studio and your game anyway. If all else fails, it's really, really good for SEO. Don't hesitate to just recycle your content for Facebook. The less effort you put in, the better. So Discord, which is my bread and butter, is the foundation of your community that will generally come here after they've bought the game. It is an absolute necessity for community management. More on that later. YouTube is a great place to keep your trailers and your live streams, and if you're shipping on Steam, you should absolutely be doing live streams. The algorithm loves it. You can also recycle your TikToks by making them into YouTube shorts. We've had some pretty recent success with it, which is fantastic. Onto Reddit, which is kind of the older sibling of Discord to me. Reddit is an interesting one. A lot of developers have found success there, but it's a place where you should tread carefully. If you do want to launch your own game subreddit, do it later in your dev cycle, once you have something playable, whether that's an alpha or a demo, up to you. That said, the community just might do it for you anyway, and if that's the case, pop in and say hi. As I said before, do tread carefully. You don't want to be around too much, but active enough that your community there feels valued and heard, but Redditors generally really like their independence. It's not listed on here, but I did want to do a quick shout out to email marketing. It is a very powerful way of reaching your audience and making sales, especially if you have some sort of presence at a consumer-facing expo like PAX Australia or one of the big PAXs over in the States. I've added a resource that you can check out in these slides, which will be available on Twitter within the next 24 hours. We just didn't quite have enough time to cover it in this talk. It's a pretty big topic by itself. So to wrap this slide up, unless you are a studio with a pretty decent amount of staff, keep the amount of platforms you have small to 2 or 3, especially if you're just one person working by yourself. If you're releasing a game on Steam, the reviews and the community forums there are also a really big part of community management too. So get used to recycling those posts and your content through those different platforms. You'll also want to look into scheduling software. At the moment at Balancing Monkey Games, we use Loomly. I really recommend it. It's got some great features, such as like when you get a post ready, it actually tells you this might not be the best time to post. Why don't you try this time? Or this is a bit too long. Maybe you want to make it a bit more succinct. And other tips like that is really, really powerful, and I highly recommend it. Now, setting up social accounts and a Discord for your game is an obvious way to start, but it's also wise to take some time to think about how you'd like those spaces to feel and operate. Think about some of these dot points here. When you're online, what are you comfortable with versus what makes you uncomfortable? This could be something as simple as, I don't like excessive swearing, or there's this really specific kind of meme that bothers me a lot. So if you feel that way, write it down and make sure you turn it into a rule, particularly for your Discord or your subreddit. What boundaries would you like to set with these internet strangers? Do you have any deal breakers? An example of a boundary that I have made for the Before We Leave community is that our non-work hours need to be respected. Our open hours are clearly listed in our Discord and on our subreddit, and we do our very best to enforce them. As a result of this, our players know when they can get help, and if newcomers get grumpy, they are gently discouraged from nagging us by our community. Another thing to consider is that you want to enjoy your community. If you were a player, would you actually want to hang out in this space? And if you wouldn't, think about why. Research what your competitors are doing as well. If there's a game that's similar to yours, go check out their social media, their Discord, everything. There's a good chance that you're probably doing competitor research anyway, in terms of like, you know, the game and its mechanics, its art, so on and so forth. Do that for their social media presence and their community management styles as well. See what they're doing that you vibe with, and see how they talk to their community and how their community talks back, and take what you like and leave what you don't. And last but not least, here in New Zealand, we've kind of gotten the short end of the stick with time zones and the best times to post. At Balancing Monkey, I found our best posting times tend to be between 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. New Zealand time, and non-critical announcements generally go out through the day during New Zealand time. That said, see where the bulk of your audience is and adjust those times accordingly as you go on. Like Paige said before, fluff around and find out.
Yeah.
I think I'm done waffling. I think it's your turn. Oh no, it is my turn still.
You got your tone.
Oh, my turn, bruh. Okay, let's go. After familiarizing yourself with these platforms, experimenting with what content you'd like to be posting, and considering your own boundaries, think about this question. If my game was a person, how would they act? This will help inform the overall tone of the way you communicate with your audience. So when I think about Before We Leave, if they were a person, I imagine they'd act much like the people in our studio. They'd be sincere, kind, very quirky, very funny, gentle, nerdy, creative, calm, albeit with a crippling fear of space whales and a deep-set hatred for potatoes. This guides the way that I write for our socials and our community. I feel like I've succeeded in that because our community, there are certain people, and like overall the people in our community act like the people in the studio. We're pretty similar, but different enough that there's like some good diversity there. I'm very happy with it. Another thing is, a wonderful thing about your community not being quite established and small is that when you're first starting out this process is being able to, again, fluff around and find out, experiment with different things and see what feels right. As I said, make sure you're researching what people are doing in the same space and genre as your game, and that will help you refine your experimenting too. Now it's your turn.
Thank you. Yeah, so similar to what Emily said, I find you really want to have your community reflect how your studio acts. At AgroCrab, we love trying out new things, challenging the norm, just bugging around, finding out. So honestly, yeah. So, and our community very much reflects this chaotic energy. So we wanted to challenge the professional standard in general anyways. We don't put up with gamers who think they can harass team members just because they bought our game. I think my favorite motto that I follow very much in life and in my community management is do no harm but take no shit. We have a history of memeing on angry gamers, and I can say that we don't get that many anymore, so it kind of worked out. Overall, when it comes down to it though, our community is incredibly kind and caring and just so funny, just like our team, just like a little bit horny, you know. So it's a great time. So the overall point is that we found showing off this tone and personality of our studio very much tells our audience what kind of games they're going to be getting from us. I just have a feeling people don't really follow us for like wholesome and calming games, you know? Like we're telling it how it is. So this way of thinking created our studio's tone to be, well, aggro. Just don't aggro the crab and you'll be fine. Okay, so now it's time to talk about Twitter for a bit. Again, it won't be super in-depth into how to win at Twitter, and if we're honest here, we're all just chumps to the algorithm of social media anyway, but hopefully it'll set you and your studio in motion with some helpful tips. So I've got some spicy notes in your area. So Twitter's a great place for the fact that there's so many different demographics on the site. You've got the gamers, you've got the content creators, press, PR, and fellow game developers. We personally love to retweet and support other devs' work because Twitter can be hard to get traction at the start of a dev's journey on there, and there's just such a cool variety of games on there. This is a more casual home base for a variety of content, update posts on the development of the game, community events, studio news, general growth, and of course, the memes. So if you don't like doing just one thing in terms of content, this is a really great place to try a variety of it, just to see what sticks for you guys. Twitter is also a great place to test out your tone, like we mentioned earlier. This is particularly where we got our brand of being an aggressive crab. In general, you certainly benefit from being casual and down to earth here. On that subject though, it is really important to find a niche or a brand to help you stand out from the rest on here. Most of the time, your game will create this for you anyway, so don't stress too much about it. Depending on what tone you thought about earlier, whether you want to keep it wholesome, chaotic, or just friendly, you will start to pick it up. I also want to recommend researching other accounts with vibes that you match with the most. I very, very much love the Crows account. They're the team behind the Stanley Parable game, and I very much like their out-of-pocket energy, so sometimes I'll have a look through and I'm like, all right, I'm inspired. So, at the very, very least, have these on your account. This is my biggest recommendation. So on your account, your bio should at least list the key points that's about either your game or your studio. For AgroCrab, we've stated that we're an unprofessional indie game studio. Cool, these people are a studio. They make games, they're indie, and they stand out because they pride themselves on being unprofessional for some reason. So there's that little niche that we have. Under that, we say, making another crab's treasure, an underwater Souls-like coming 2023. Sick. Lots of info on their upcoming game, when it comes out, and briefly what it is. And then finally, we loop back to the statement of being unprofessional by telling people to wishlist it, or else. So, and then having a link, obviously. The emojis aren't necessary, but they do really help break up all of the text just for the eye, since Twitter has a lot of words. Yeah, so after that, if they still want to know more without having to click off Twitter, this is why you have a pinned post, specifically a pin post for your game, whether it's a trailer, but if that's not announced yet, just use like a popular tweet that best shows off your game. You want players to immediately know what you're all about just instantly when they click your account. And yeah, it's just a great thing to do in that way, just like the bio, make some important keynotes in that tweet as well. Finally, if you have a tweet that is doing well, or you're making a post that needs like a link or a call to action, I recommend putting the tweet, having a link underneath this tweet is into a thread. If you use Twitter, you know what that is. It's just an extra tweet connected. And basically it's because Twitter doesn't like lots of links on the timeline, so they tend to hide these tweets if you put a link in it on the algorithm. And the last thing that you want is your announcement tweet to get hidden in the algorithm because you put like 4 links into it. Yeah, so I recommend putting it underneath. I included an image showing what that kind of looks like. When you start using Twitter, you'll start to pick it up anyway. Try to not spam your followers with links under every single one, but if a tweet's getting numbies, just chuck it underneath and you'll be okay. Overall, again, I just recommend having fun, like spending time on it, seeing what types of content works and sticks, and just, yeah, images and videos do always do best. Now that we've talked about Twitter, it's time to talk about my favorite app.
Yes.
Very much. I have been so excited to talk about this app. So if this slide looks like a lot, it looked a lot worse before, and then I cut it down. It was pretty intense. But this is basically what TikTok is like when you first see it, and I swear you will get used to it. I would also quickly like to mention that I'd love for anyone to ask me questions about TikTok afterwards. I love talking about it. It's what I've done for the past year, so please feel free to.
You're very good at it.
Thank you. So, why should you care about TikTok? In short, for those who have never seen TikTok, it has evolved to be a vertical video platform with thousands of niche trends, videos, and categories, and it is now very much dominating the social media stage. TikTok has started to become a major competitor for many sites. Honestly, there's a crazy stat for about 40% of young people, when they're looking for a place for lunch, they won't go to Google anymore or Maps, they'll just go to Instagram or TikTok. And same with a lot of other Google searches. Yeah, about 40%, which is pretty nuts. So they do the exact same thing for games now, and it's honestly because of the visual appeal. You can see here, you've got the visuals right there on TikTok, and then with Google, you're like, I don't want to read words. So there's that appeal that's coming to a lot of people. Another reason that TikTok is great is that it caters content for you. This is based on your location, the videos you like, comment, favorite, and even videos that you just stare at for a long time will affect what TikTok recommends to you, which is great if you're trying to market your game. I'll also note, it is a little scary too, but definitely I feel like that's common with a lot of social media sites, so make sure you do educate yourself on the dodgy side of social media, but we're not talking about that anyway. So one thing I also really have to mention is that TikTok is a big time investment, especially if you're just starting out. If you intend to do daily posts, it's almost going to be a full-time job. At AgroCrab, we currently do 6 days a week, more or less, and it can sometimes take about 70 to 80% of my work week. So I kind of created a rule of thumb, which is unless you have a very ambitious idea that you know is worth it, try to only spend about 30 minutes per video on TikTok just for your sanity, and then if you are really confident that it's worth putting more effort into, then keep going. But I think that really helps to stop you from getting burnt out. I also highly recommend getting the team to also help out with content occasionally. I'm very lucky to have a work culture at our studio where the team strongly supports content ideas and is often always there for brainstorming if I ever need it. Plus, it really makes me as a community manager feel less alone because I am quite literally on another island from them. So it's very great. So I have a lot more hot and sexy notes in your area. I could literally talk about the intricate things about TikTok for hours, but hopefully this helps set you in motion. Again, it seems like a lot, and then the more you use it, it will start to get better. First off, TikTok loves when you use their things. What does this mean? Using their features basically helps boost you in their algorithm. In TikTok, you can select background audio, you can reply to comments using video, and just so many things. And in my opinion, the most important one is actually captions. So they have a built-in auto subtitles feature. It literally takes 2 seconds, it's auto-generated, and it contributes to the algorithm boosts, and it's just more accessible for people. So it's honestly a win-win, so just definitely use captions. I always get asked also how much you need to post for TikTok to take off. Honestly, it's really important to just focus on quality over quantity for TikTok, even though I know everyone says that. But like I said earlier, feeds are catered for you. So this means it heavily relies on what people like. So if they don't enjoy your video, then they won't like it, they won't favorite it, and TikTok will just hide it from the algorithm, which sucks, especially if you spend a lot of time on something. So don't stress too much on how often you're posting. I've seen successful accounts that post once every few weeks, others every day. So you should definitely aim for, my recommendation is once a week when you're first starting out to get the hang of it. But it really depends on what you're able to do and your studio. So be realistic at the start and avoid getting burnt out, because if you do, it really sucks. Yeah, so one last thing about TikTok is TikTok players really appreciate transparency a lot more than other social media sites. At the end of the day, they know you're trying to sell them your game, so just be honest about that. We often say that we're trying to be hot and rich, and we need you guys to buy our game so that we can be like that. And it's just making a joke of something that they already know we want. So to show off a funny bug you could do that's halted production for a week, tell them that the game is going to be this price because you want to have money to make more games in the future. Say what they know that they're going to hear anyway. This transparency creates a community where players trust the process, and then they know what to expect from your studio. Okay, so if we're trying to convince you in terms of the business side and the money and stuff, the biggest question about this is how this translates to out-of-app conversions. Wishlisting is probably the best thing to promote on TikTok. Once the game's out, obviously promote buying the game. Other than that, it's very clout-based. We didn't see too much conversions of followers moving to, say, Twitter or to another site, but it's really, really good for in-app exposure. The amount of people who I've heard saying, I saw this thing on TikTok, and then you don't hear them mention it from another thing that they saw. It's been about 10 months now, I think, maybe a bit more, since we launched our AgroCrab TikTok account, and we now have about 150,000 followers, nearly 3 million likes or something like that, and over 15 million views at least for our games. And it's just been a great, easy way for, well, not really easy, but it's been a great time for us to advertise our game, basically. You can see here on the bottom right how our follower account spiked after having a video go viral of about 500,000 views, which was really, really cool to see just off having one post do really, really well. We actually, when I mentioned that we published the game Subway Midnight in 1 month, we managed to get the game to 10,000 wishlists in 3 weeks just using TikTok alone, and we launched the game the week after that. And for an indie game that it hadn't really been talked about much at all, within 3 weeks, it was very, very exciting to do. Okay, and finally, I recommend that you also check out these TikTok accounts if you can. We will be putting the slides up online as well. These are all very successful in their own ways, so I recommend doing your research. We've got Mail Time, Landfall Games, obviously check out AgroCrab Games, and
Balancing Monkey, thank you.
And also Balancing Monkey. Yes, so I've got all these guys here. It's all right, it's your turn, Emily.
Oh yes, before I go, this has been pretty dense. Does anyone want to get up and have a cheeky stretch? I'm going to have some... Get up, shake it out.
Thank
folks.
you.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you, Paige. So now that you've given us an excellent rundown on some social media platforms, I want to talk to you about Discord. Thank you very much, Bowie, if you're watching this, for the wonderful screenshot. I do appreciate you a lot. So, Discord is where you should be retaining the audience that you have ideally captured on your social media. As I said before, they're pretty likely to join after you've released the game, or a demo, or alpha, or beta, or something like that. So when you're setting up a Discord server, you probably want to make it around the same time as your social media platforms. There is a lot to learn with Discord, so get experimenting. I will also do my very best to give you a high-level overview. And as Paige said before, more than happy to answer questions about the platform after this talk too. So, in case you don't know what Discord is, to me, Discord is kind of like a forum-style site like Reddit mushed into the old-school VoIP programs like TeamSpeak with the elegance of a communication platform like Slack. You join servers by using an invitation link. I do think that there is also a search function, but I have not met a single person who has used it. It supports text chat, voice and video calls, tons of emojis, including custom ones, a billion different bots, and many other things. I have used Discord for World of Warcraft raids, for managing my own Twitch channel community back in the day, for communicating with my friends through direct messages, D&D sessions, and now for a game that I work on. As a solo developer or a small studio, your ultimate goal for your Discord community is to help it become self-managing. This means having the community look after the community rather than spending hours babysitting it. This is especially important if your game is going to have a long tail. The Before We Leave server launched in 2009 alongside our very first announcement, and we're only just starting to wind it down now. What did I say?
2009.
We're actually time travelers. I don't know if you're new. Feels like a convenient time to mention it. And it is quite right. We did launch it in 2019 alongside our first announcement. Our long-term community members there, who have, some of which have been around since 2019, they've been around since then, and they're vibrant, they're passionate, they're funny, and they also are passionate about our games and our studio. And they have been crucial to the Discord's health and helping new players as well. But how do you get there? I'll get to that soon. Let me tell you really quickly about the Before We Leave server. It was established in June 2019 by Sam, my creative director. Thank you, Sam. You did a great job. Its release coincided with the announcement of Before We Leave. Oh, sorry, I've just lost my spot. Oh, yes, the announcement went viral and was picked up by many prestigious press outlets. And after about 1 month, it had almost 2,000 members with about 30,000 odd messages sent. Right now, we have 7,000 members. People were incentivized to join by Before We Leave's alpha only being accessible through the Discord. Staying was also incentivized by an idle game that emulated the early stages and the early gameplay loop of Before We Leave. We also had a story game. This was written by Saf Davison. Thank you, Saf. It was a branching narrative experience in the Discord where people could vote on the outcomes of a story. It wasn't as successful as we were hoping, but the right kind of people invested and they hung around. We've since woven this amazing story into the game as a whole, and as well as its community-driven outcomes as well. When I joined in March 2020, I was able to hit the ground running since many of the foundations of a good community were already built. I've run game competitions for Before We Leave, in-game competitions specifically, and many community feedback sessions. I noticed that when I joined, the community really appreciated being heard and feeling like we were listening, so I've continued to do that. I endeavour to make our players feel valued. We couldn't do what we do without them, so may as well, right? Nowadays, as Before We Leave heads towards its sunset, the server is primarily used for announcements, chatting, and player support. It's not the busiest nor the best server on the internet, and that's absolutely fine because we have a strong, dedicated audience who enjoy hanging out and they are invested in what we are doing right now and in the future. I also want to call out, again, the great work that Sam did in those early days when it was just him working on Before We Leave. He wrote fantastic rules, he found great mods, and he set up a server that was fun to be in, all as an introverted solo dev releasing his maiden title. His work in 2019 and early 2020 has made my life as a community manager so much easier. The foundations of our game and our studio tone was there, and important boundaries were in place as well. So if you are in a similar position to Sam as a solo dev launching your maiden title, try and set up your Discord in a healthy and a positive way, because any future community manager that you hire will be so intensely grateful, just like I am. All right, so real quick, here's how I've set up our Discord. You can see our channels, our categories, and our roles. To keep things tidy, I've used categories to house channels pertaining to similar topics, so like Before We Leave centric topics, player support, and off-topic channels where people can talk about pretty much anything they want, within the rules, of course. There are also corresponding roles to these channels. These are likely some of the first things you'll set up in your new Discord. They are also the key to helping you manage your community well and keeping things a little bit more organized. You can also make and change channels, of course, for whatever your heart desires or your community needs. A great way to manage all of this and the members that inhabit your Discord is by using bots. Choosing bots can be really overwhelming. There are so many of them now. Oh my goodness. I recommend Dinobot for managing your server and the roles in it. Their documentation is fantastic and there's loads of tutorials for them on the internet. So, what are some basic steps that you can take away from this talk to having a healthy and happy server that will thrive long term? First up, you want to funnel those who interact with you on social media towards your game's Discord. Have you got a Twitter and a TikTok? Make sure you mention that you have a Discord there. Try and incentivize it like we did too. Make sure that there's an activity that people can engage with when they're there. For rules, it's extremely important that you set up a community space that is safe for people. I have heard horror stories of developers wanting to have a no rules Discord server. Let me be very clear, that is a stupid idea. Do not do that. It will encourage extremely bad behavior, and in our day and age, you want to be in a position where you can stamp that out fast. I have a zero tolerance policy towards bad behavior, and it has served me very, very well. I don't have time for nonsense. So as a result of me being a hard ass, basically, our server is a lovely place to be. And yours can be too. If you're strong from the start, you'll be rewarded with a healthy, diverse, happy server that is inhabited with truly lovely people who will want to stick around. The real bonus, though, is that it's less moderation work for you. Speaking of moderators, you'll want to pick some. You want to choose them from the best people in your community who embrace the values and tone that you like. Listen to their feedback and make sure that you reward them, because they work hard and they often don't ask for much. A good way to give them a cheeky little reward is a free key to your game, and a credit as well. We've had many of our mods since 2019, and they're loyal and they're hardworking and they're super trustworthy, so if you treat your mods well, you will be rewarded in kind. If you're not feeling confident with how your Discord is set up, a great way to become confident is to make a private server and do some testing in there. It's a great way to muck around with roles and crazy bot commands, or just seeing what a post might look like with some emojis and some embedded links. And a warning, your Discord will probably pop off big time when you launch your game for real, and it will be very player support centric. Get ready because it is pretty full on.
Cool. Thank you, Emily. So we just want to put this out there for both community managers and for studio heads to keep these points in mind to keep your community manager happy, not burnt out, and sane. So whether you are a studio head or community manager, touch grass, please. By that, I do mean it's really important for you to pick up other hobbies outside of games. If you dare say to me and be like, but video games are my hobby. First of all, I don't believe you. It's not the only thing. You're still going to think about work in the back of your head a lot of the time. So it is really good to pick up other hobbies as well. So garden or learn to crochet or get into cars or something. I don't know. Just having a break from work often helps problem solve work issues without even realizing it. And it's just good to have that kind of break.
You might also have to do this during work, and I know that no one wants to get up from their desk and like go and do something completely different. You kind of want to sit there and nut it out until you figure out the problem, or until you just feel better. But if you're feeling crappy, then get up and have a break. It is well worth it in the end. I've already talked a little bit about setting boundaries, but I really believe that it is worth mentioning again, because you are being online and professional and a friendly person to help sell a product. There will be some lonely souls who take a bit of too much of a shining to you. Set boundaries for yourself and for the person who might act inappropriately towards you as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that you can just ban people. Like, if they are causing any issues that hurts your community or your team, you can just do that. It just keeps everyone safe and chill, and you are allowed to do that. So the next big thing after that is no touchy outside of work, which basically means remember that this is your job, so you shouldn't have to be up at midnight dealing with something. Don't check the work socials outside of working hours unless it's something like your servers are being hacked or something like that. Most of the time, it can usually wait until the next morning. So don't expect your community managers to be online all the time outside of work. It's draining having to do that, and you'll just burn through community managers at the speed of light if you do try to.
Another thing to consider here is following this piece of advice and all the other stuff that we've mentioned might help you avoid having a PR disaster. Many of us would have seen some poor developer on Twitter having to apologize for a particularly spicy take or maybe just straight up aggression because they've responded to an angry player or someone who was being inappropriate or rude in the first place. Give yourself the space to avoid these situations by just relaxing and not touching your work outside of work. Not replying to a particularly spicy piece of feedback at 1 a.m. can save you a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. Oh, my bee. Sorry, hon.
All good. So, finally, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. If you mess up, take the L, accept and acknowledge that you messed up, and learn from it. Like, it's okay. You will live and you will learn. And in the end, it all contributes to growing and gaining experience. No one is just immediately good at community work or social media. It's scary to suddenly represent an entire brand. I was terrified of suddenly being in control of a Twitter account, which had, I think it was 30,000 at the time, and we're now at 48. That was terrifying. I thought if I made a mistake, I was going to be ripped to pieces online or something. And so whether you're a community manager or a studio head working on the community, if you have a team behind you who is supportive as well as your community, it'll be okay.
Cool. So, if you're really overwhelmed, and if you are an introvert and you are freaking out, please hire a community manager. Even if you contract one for a single day a week, we can have a massive impact on your project and save you a lot of emotional exhaustion. How to hire a community manager is another talk in itself, so if you have any questions about how you might go about hiring one, please feel free to hit us up after the talk and on Twitter as well. We're happy to answer questions.
Yeah. Okay, one final thing. These are the resources that we highly recommend. We've got people like Victoria Tran, who has done a phenomenal job at creating friendly and kind communities for quite a few titles. We'll be uploading these slides later on to Twitter, likely after this talk. So feel free to look at the links on that as well. And that is our talk. Thank you all for coming, and hopefully you're now very good at community stuff. You did great. Thank you. So did you. Yeah.